Welcome to Classical Poets Live, where we're making gains in poetical world domination one day at a time. I'm your host, Andrew Benson Brown, representing the Society of Classical Poets. You can check out our website, which is actually the third largest online poetry publication in the English-speaking world today in terms of organic traffic. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, you can do that. However, I have to warn you that you may be labeled a stochastic terrorist, which is a term that one of our adversaries has thrown at us. And even though it's not a real term, it was just invented by politically radical idiots, it is something you'll have to endure if you throw in your lot with us, which I would encourage you to do. You can support real poetry and prove you're not a coward. Getting some good comments about the podcast on Spotify from 422 Lolo. This podcast is just about interesting enough to all but compel me to revise my previous stance that poetry is stale and dull. Well, thank you, 422 Lolo. And I am also proud to say I have received my very first attack on Twitter. Or X, whatever. I am disappointed to say that the tweet didn't slander me personally. It was not an ad hominem attack, just was more of a criticism. And Connor Kelly says about my last episode, interesting video essay on prestigious poetry journals. And that while I, Andrew Benson Brown, champion SCP poetry, I failed to note how it has become more a political than a poetical entity. A circle jerk that outlaws criticism and promotes a hate-filled agenda. Well, thanks for watching, Connor. Now, I actually did address this issue briefly during the first segment of my episode, the video essay that preceded the one that Connor Kelly talked about. And as it turns out, the conservative political themes for which the SCP is heavily criticized by people on the left only constitutes about 20 to 25% of its total published output. The other 75 to 80% is all just about normal stuff that people used to write about, which is absolutely not something you can say about the poetry promoted by the Poetry Foundation or the Academy of American Poets, or any of the top journals for that matter. It's flipped around. The poems in those publications are at least 80% political and maybe 20% non-political. Although that's probably being generous, I seriously doubt whether it's even that. But thank you, Connor Kelly, for tweeting at me. Your criticism is a watershed event in my X experience. And please do criticize me in the future and tell your friends to criticize me too. Ad hominem attacks are always welcome. They make things so much more fun, and you just can't stoop too low in the po biz. So I have a good episode for you today. Going to be interviewing C.B. Anderson, a highly prolific poet, one of the leading classical poets of our time, which is of course another way of saying that he's one of the leading poets of our time. Plain and simple. Since free verse poets mostly just aren't any good. And that's going to come later. But first, I have to rant a little bit. I wanted to talk about the Academy of American Poets, poets.org being their website. Now, I mentioned them in my last episode. They are the second most popular online poetry publication. And if you want to talk about lucrative poetry prizes, it doesn't get any more lucrative than the Wallace Stevens Prize, which is, according to their website, given annually to recognize outstanding artistic achievement in the art of poetry over a poet's career. Established in 1994, the award carries a $100,000 stipend. Recipients are chosen by the Academy of American Poets Board of Chancellors. No applications are accepted. Obviously, I added the British accent there. I'm sure they would not approve of someone using a WASP accent to describe them and their mission statement. But nevertheless, there it is. So, would be great to win the Wallace Stevens Award, but you aren't really winning it exactly, are you? Since there's no actual competition. They're just choosing whoever they feel like giving it to. Not really sure what that criteria is. Like so many of these organizations, there's just not a lot of transparency, however much they want to talk about equality. They essentially operate behind an iron curtain. But let's just see who's winning this award. This year, it's Afa Michael Weaver. Seems like a nice, happy guy from his photo. He was actually a factory worker for the first half of his life. Very respectable. I like him already. It's also notable because he is the first man to be awarded this prize in a decade. Joy Harjo was a previous winner. A lot of other feminist female poets, a lot of big names in the poetry world that, of course, nobody's ever heard outside of the poetry world. But I bring this up because I want to ask, where is all this money coming from that's just being flushed down the toilet to these terrible poets? And I don't really know the full answer to that, but I do know that just this year, the Academy of American Poets was awarded a $65,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. So unless there's some wealthy donor, like there was at the Poetry Foundation, who gave them all their money, then I'm thinking that the answer to this question, where does the money come from, is taxpayers. The National Endowment of the Arts gets a couple $100 million every year to divvy out. And so we ask ourselves, where is this money going? Who is it being given to? So if we go to the main webpage of the NEA, we see there's this picture of a woman. And if you're listening to this rather than watching, I'll just paint a verbal picture of this. This Latina woman is at a farm. There are crop rows in the background. She's in the foreground, standing on a small wooden platform about 3 feet in length that she just plopped in the dirt road. And she's standing on this platform, waving a pink scarf and wearing sunglasses, although the sky is clouded over and it's not bright outside. But if we look at this caption, Vanessa Sanchez is her name. She is performing as part of Farm Worker Friday. So I've had to guess here, just not knowing anything, she is probably protesting the oppression and ill treatment of Mexican farm laborers. Now, I'm also just kind of curious. If you're dancing in a field, who exactly is watching this? Like, who is your audience for this? I mean, I know that you're taking a video of it and streaming it online and throwing the video up, but is there actually a live audience here? Because I feel like, most theater goers, they aren't gonna get on a bus and drive to some field in the middle of nowhere. If we go to this dance company's website, we can see that they're performing here. It's in an urban setting this time, so they're wearing COVID masks while performing, even though they're outside, standing far apart from one another. And actually, nobody's even in the background. There are no cars or people in the streets at all, so nobody's even around, but you're still wearing the masks. The question arises, is this group about promoting their indigenous culture or Faucian fear-mongering and the masking for life agenda? Because it kind of looks like the latter here. So because they toe the ideological line, the group got a grant from the NEA. That was just this year. And one of the requirements for even getting a grant now is that in the application, you have to prove how you are contributing to equity. So Vanessa Sanchez got a grant and then subsequently complained about having to prove this because the grant funders were not thinking about equity from a holistic perspective. And that's just the NEA grant. 2 years ago, the Mellon Foundation actually awarded the group $445,000. So almost $500,000. So you can stand on your platform and wave a scarf. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that the cost for that production is maybe like $100 that it would cost. Maybe, I don't know, $200 if you're buying some really nice spandex and sunglasses. I'm not really sure where that $500,000 is going, but it's going somewhere. As with Ibram X. Kendi's Center for Anti-Racist Research, probably we'll never really know where the money is going. But they're divvying it out like crazy. And that's just looking at one grantee. There are thousands of others. If we click on the grants page, we see this picture, and it's more people of color dancing. If we scroll down, we see this is a production of Twelfth Night at Yale that was put on a few years back. Like I said, National Endowment of the Arts, over $200 million this year is their budget. And what do we get for this vast sum being expended? Dancing Scarf Lady, woke 12th Night, some jazz. I can get down with that, actually. Anything else? Yes, they do give grants to more normal things like orchestras, the Washington National Opera. It's just that they never promote any of this normal stuff on their website, so you don't know what's happening. And actually, a lot of it isn't really that normal anymore. at all. There are so many diversity quotas that the orchestras and the opera companies have to make that they are hiring unqualified performers. The WNO is also hiring people from marginalized backgrounds to compose new operas. They're absolutely terrible. If you listen to these operas for 30 seconds, you basically want to put a drill to your head. And that's just the music, not even talking about the plots. LGBTQ themes sitting on death row. In fact, this local broadcasting station, Wake Forest Classical Radio Station, WCPE, they announced that they were not going to broadcast 6 operas this season from New York Metropolitan Opera due to concerns over offensive content and language. Perfectly understandable, in my opinion, but this decision got a lot of very intense criticism and backlash, so the music director of the station reversed the decision, saying that the station will broadcast the operas because it wants to build an inclusive community brought together by the shared love for great classical music. And just by the language there, I'm thinking that probably this music director was threatened and was afraid of losing her job, so she buckled. I'm sure she has a family to feed, it's understandable. So, not sure who's going to listen to these terrible operas, but they are being broadcasted for all to hear. I just say this because it's further evidence that you are not allowed to criticize the reigning arts regime. And with a few exceptions, what we see is largely millions of dollars being flushed down the drain. Our rate of return is garbage. Artists have always been kind of, they're like social parasites. You have to support them so that they can do their work, and you need money to support them, which usually I favor. But we're not getting good art out of this. We're just getting political statements. And you could take that money and do literally anything more useful with it. Again, I'm all about promoting the arts, but the caveat is it needs to be good. We need to be promoting real art, not fake art. And it's actually possible to do this in a much more cost-effective way than just throwing like millions of dollars just at the wall, giving dance companies huge sums of money. You can fund a lot of little projects here and there, $10,000 or so, which admittedly the NEA does do some. But given that the NEA really can't be reformed at this point, I think, my recommendation is that it needs to be totally defunded. Trump actually wanted to do this during his presidency, and he got a lot of backlash for it, and he wasn't able to do it. But I think that he was actually right on in this case. Now, I'm an aesthete to the core, but better to fund no art at all than to fund garbage art, I say. So I know I've gone beyond the scope of my subject matter, talking about poetry with this little spiel, talking about dance, talking about music, but it just illustrates how widespread this problem is. And radical problems require radical solutions.